The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
The man who did Dreams from My Real Father. And we're sort of going down a list of explanations. We talked about medical records. We talked about a Columbia thesis. Then Harvard. Again, he hits Harvard law. That's a bizarre story.
Well, he got into Harvard, we know now, with the help of Middle East money. Saudi Arabia was supplying money to Khalid al-Mansour, who became aware of Obama through Vernon Jarrett. Yeah. Vernon Jarrett is the father-in-law of Valerie Jarrett.
Mm-hmm. And who was one of the, probably, if not the most powerful person in the administration.
Correct. Yeah. And Vernon Jarrett was a colleague. He worked with Obama's real father, Frank Marshall Davis, on the Chicago Star, the communist newspaper in Chicago. And Obama was funneled into this system where they received money. The Saudis were trying to gain influence in America and were supporting blacks and other minorities to send them to college. So what happened was Obama's academic career was paid for by the Saudis, and then Obama was handed off from the Saudis, from the academic Middle East funding network, to the Arab political funding network in the name of Tony Rezko, and
Sure.
Rezko funded his political
Sure.
career. So Obama's entire academic career and political career was paid for and funded by Middle Eastern interests. In that light, you can understand
The Brotherhood.
his alliance with and his identification with, culturally and otherwise, with the Islamic world.
You watch this, and
It's payback.
I was going to ask that. Watching what happens in Benghazi, watching what they did in Libya, watching what they did in Egypt, and when this whole thing blows up on Mohammed Morsi, they take this middle ground. We just care about democracy.
Right. There was the middle ground when in Iran the protesters were hitting the
Absolutely.
streets. It was the middle ground. We don't want to interfere.
We want to leave them. That's right.
The radicals in Egypt, we don't want to interfere. But when the radicals want to take over in Libya, in Syria, the Obama administration is behind them with weapons, arms, smuggling,
Indeed.
illegal arms trafficking. That's what Benghazi is about. The CIA so-called annex in Benghazi was running guns and jihadis from Libya to Syria. So the reason that they covered up Benghazi with the silly video story.
Where's that guy's in the gulag? That guy's he's a political prisoner now, is he not?
He's actually in Long Beach now. He's in a halfway house. I've actually spoken to him a few times.
Let me do this. I'm close to a pause. I'd rather pause now, and we'll pick up, because you've talked to this guy?
Yeah.
Wow. This is the man, 6:40, 20 minutes before the hour 7. Good morning, everyone, on a Monday, the 8th of July. Peter Boyle, 710 KNUS, the voice of people on the Front Range. Our website, 710knus.com. You can see Dreams from My Real Father. I can't wait for Joel to talk about what he's uncovered in terms of Columbia. I have known this man for the longest time and never met him. His name is Joel Gilbert. And he also is the guy who built that film, Dreams from My Real Father. And we now have the film up this morning on our website, 710 KNUS, who asked questions who Barack Hussein Obama really is. Also, Joe Kovacs is coming up later in the morning on this man who has emerged in California and claiming to be Jesus, believe it or not. So we're talking about what happened in Benghazi. And if you've been following that history, you know that early on, Mrs. Clinton, the mainstream press and others said, oh, it's because they were reacting to this film. Do the narrative on this and take your time. Mike, we need to get a microphone.
Are we on?
Yeah,
okay. Well, the truth is that the CIA annex in Benghazi was there for the purpose of running guns from Libya, from the jihadis in Libya, to Syria. Mrs. Clinton announced a gun buyback program the year before. The United States supplied $40 million. I think the Dutch pitched in $1 million. And they were buying back guns as if it was in a neighborhood in
Philly or
South
something.
Central L.A. or something.
Yeah.
So they were buying back Stingers, shoulder-fired missiles, you name it. And the CIA annex was running those guns by ship to Turkey into Syria. The State Department mission, so-called mission or consulate in Benghazi, was simply a cover for the CIA annex so they could operate under the guise of diplomatic cover. When the attack took place, and I have a separate theory on that, but when the attack took place, they simply came up with a simple cover story, no different than my father was a Kenyan goat herder. You name it. It's just a one-liner. I met the Kenyan when I was, in Hawaii. It's a one-liner, and it usually works. It covers the situation. The real situation is,
but this film,
yeah,
and ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, everybody bought the film story.
Right.
And then we got to see it.
No one has seen the film.
We saw a blurb of it, a little cut.
Not even. But the idea.
Oh, really? That thing that I saw really wasn't part of that film?
I think
it was so bad.
Part of the trailer might have been on, but the fact that no one has seen the film. I'm actually going to get to see the film in about 2 weeks. I've talked to the Nakula Basam Nakula, and he's going to arrange for me.
That's the filmmaker's name.
Right. He's in a halfway house in California, and I'm going to check it out and review it and let you know if I think there's anything really offensive in it or not from an Islamic point of view. But the reason they...
Now, let me go slow.
Yeah.
Because we make jokes that guy's in the gulag, like in Stalin. He's somehow been... What was his crime? Taxes?
I don't know. It was a probation violation for something prior. He was involved in a number of different businesses.
Okay.
And they claimed it was a probation violation. Essentially, he's just some poor schmuck, if I can use that word, that was used by the administration to cover up what was a gun-running operation that resulted in the death of a U.S. ambassador.
Yeah.
Now, we just went through Fast and Furious, where they covered that up and refused to release the documents by executive order. So it was not that they were covering for a false narrative, GM is alive and bin Laden is dead. That's just a campaign slogan. It was something much more serious. They were covering the fact that 11 years after 9/11, the United States government was running guns from one al-Qaeda-affiliated group in Libya to another al-Qaeda group in Syria. That is very, very serious, and it resulted in the death again of an American official, in this case, a U.S. ambassador. And that's what was being covered up, and this poor guy is in a halfway house almost a year later still, and the media simply whitewashed the story.
Why is the administration keeping this guy suppressed? And I'm glad you're talking to him. And what really, other than to show a film that no one, this idea that riots were all over the Middle East because of this film. First of all, the film was pretty old. Number one, I thought it had been around for a while.
I think it had been around for a while. No one has actually ever seen it. I think there was a trailer, might have been online.
Fair enough.
But it was clearly just an excuse that some people used maybe in Cairo, focused on the 9/11.
But did Obama come out and actually speak about the film as the reason? And didn't Mrs. Clinton do the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. They even they spent about $40,000 of our money putting an ad in Pakistan to deny the U.S. involvement with it. Of course, Obama went to the UN and proclaimed that.
Remember that.
Those who slander the Prophet of Islam will not decide the future, something like that. So it's just a little depressing that they can come up with such silly false narratives and get away with anything.
Stone got away with it. It was not that movie, and they used the movie as an excuse. And when you watch the evening news, the excuse was bought, and it was used, and they drove past it. And as Robert Spencer, another very powerful researcher who gets no attention, said, the same people who murdered the American ambassador, the same people who were in Libya fighting, were the same people that 6 or 8 months prior had been trying to kill American GIs in Afghanistan.
The most serious thing is the United States was allied with al-Qaeda in Libya and is allied with al-Qaeda in Syria. Indeed. And was running guns between the two. This is a almost impeachable offense, and it resulted in the death of an American ambassador. The reason they did not try to secure the State Department annex or mission consulate, they call it, there in Benghazi, is because there was no classified material. It was just a cover for the CIA operation. The CIA annex was immediately secured, and they left the annex and the mission unsecured because there were no classified documents. Also, the reason they were not given extra security when they asked for it is because the United States was allied with the al-Qaeda militias. There was no reason to supply extra security if the United States was allies with the militia in Benghazi.
All right, it is 6:54, about 6 minutes before the hour 7. Do a quick turnaround on a Monday morning, July the 8th, 2013. So how do we get Congress to actually investigate the eligibility of Barack Hussein Obama to be President of the United States? John Longmont, the horse is out of the barn.
Well, Obama may be eligible. I believe his real father, of course, was an American citizen, Frank Marshall Davis. He might be eligible. The issue is document fraud. It's illegal to manipulate a government document. It's illegal to have presented his birth certificate to all the election commissions in the country, claiming that as proof of his citizenship. So these are all felonies that are impeachable, and it's always the cover-up that gets
fraud.
these guys in
Sure.
trouble. It's document fraud.
Right.
I think Obama may be eligible, but he manipulated documents, he forged photos. It's all about a false narrative to hide an agenda that is unacceptable to America.
You were telling me a story off air. As a kid, as a young man, you attended London School of Economics.
That's correct.
Who was a classmate?
Saif al-Islam al-Qaddafi was
Muammar
Gaddafi's son.
Wow.
I would see him in the commissary, in the cafeteria with bodyguards, and they used to say that at that time, and it was true, all the revolutions in the Third World were being planned in the cafeteria
Absolutely.
at that time.
Well, Gaddafi, he was pushing all that stuff south. Is he dead or alive now? Do we know?
Gaddafi?
No, his son,
Say the son. I think he's being sentenced. I've been following it. He's been sentenced to, I believe he's been sentenced to death.
That's
but
what I
think he's still alive.
What do you believe happened in Benghazi?
I have a theory that I wrote about. You can Google that on WorldNet Daily. Everything I've seen, I believe, says this is correct. The United States was allied with the al-Qaeda-affiliated militia, the February 17th Brigades, and the al-Sharif group. These were our allies. We were running guns from them to their allies in Syria. The February 17th Brigades was guarding the U.S. consulate. These were American allies. What happened, I believe, is the Libyan government, the new Libyan government, was a liberal government. They took power in August. Their president, Musharraf, he was a former terrorist, and when he took power, they had no army, and the Libyan government was saying that they had to exert their influence and project their power across the country, or they may not last. The Islamist militias in Benghazi declared that they did not recognize the new government and that they would have a second Libyan revolution. They had all the power in Benghazi, and they were penetrating the Tripoli neighborhoods. So I believe, and all the evidence shows, that the attack on the Benghazi installations was not an al-Qaeda attack. Al-Qaeda typically goes in, they had 120 guys, they could have murdered everybody or taken everyone hostage. Clearly what was going on is an expulsion of the U.S. operations from Benghazi. They simply penetrated the State Department compound, set the buildings on fire until they got in their cars and left. They let them leave, and then they tried to save the U.S. ambassador, took him to the hospital. Then they drove over to the CIA annex and started lobbing mortars until they decided to leave. They let them go, and they burned the place down. The only one with an interest in ending U.S. operations in Benghazi was the new Libyan government, which was threatened by the Islamist militias who were allied with the United States. So by eliminating U.S. presence in Benghazi, they eliminated the core base of support for the Islamist groups. They immediately fingered the Islamists, the Libyan president, as to blame, and they used that attack as an excuse to disarm the militias and exert their power over the entire country. So I believe it was a successful operation by the Libyan government to expel the U.S. forces who were supporting the Islamists.
The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.